Let's say China.
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 China. China.
Since retaking office in January 2025, Trump's trade policy resumed its aggressive posture toward China. Early in his term, he revived the narrative that China was taking advantage of US trade policy and manufacturing.
We're having a little squabble with China because we've been treated very unfairly for many, many decades, for actually a long time.
In April, his administration imposed new sweeping tariffs on top of pre-existing ones, culminating in a 145% average tariff on all Chinese imports. The strategy was designed to either force China back to the negotiating table or economically isolate it altogether. Trump and his inner circle sold these tariffs as the necessary shock therapy to realign trade, restore manufacturing, and rebalance US leverage. The administration also floated the idea of reciprocal tariffs on all countries, but China was clearly the primary target. For a brief moment, this bold escalation was politically useful. It rallied his base, revived the economic nationalism message, and was pitched as a sign of strength. But that victory lap didn't last. The reaction to the tariff surge was swift and devastating. Global markets tumbled. The S&P 500 dropped by over 14%, while tech stocks and exporters suffered catastrophic hits. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, downgraded global growth projections and pointed directly to the US-China tariff war as a destabilizing force. Business groups, foreign governments, and even some Republican lawmakers voiced concern. China's reaction wasn't just retaliation, it was measured and strategic. Rather than continually matching tariff hikes, Beijing capped its retaliation at 125%, signaling it would not continue the tit-for-tat escalation. Launched diplomatic outreach to Europe, Southeast Asia, and BRICS allies to frame the US as a rogue protectionist actor. Refused to engage further on Trump's terms, openly mocking additional tariffs as meaningless. At home, China faced mounting internal pressure, a softening economy, weak property markets, high youth unemployment, but it opted for domestic stimulus and international coalition building instead of open economic warfare. This strategy both diffused internal dissatisfaction and projected resilience abroad. The result? Trump's escalation began to isolate the US economically and diplomatically. By April 22nd, the pressure became too great to ignore. In the Oval Office, Trump reversed tone.
145% is very high, and it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high. It got up to there. We were talking about fentanyl, where, various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high.
Gone was the chest-thumping talk of economic battle. Instead, he said the US would not play hardball with China. He stated that the 145% tariffs would come down substantially, although not to zero. He promised a deal would happen soon, and framed it as if China was now coming around. This reversal likely stemmed from several critical realizations. Investor confidence had begun to collapse under the weight of prolonged tariff pressure, with markets tumbling and fears of a recession growing. Financial contagion loomed as businesses delayed investment and consumers tightened spending. At the same time, China made a calculated decision to stop playing Trump's tariff game. In doing so, it effectively called Trump's bluff, signaling that any further hikes would do more harm to the US than to China. If Trump persisted, he'd simply be taxing his own economy while China stood still, unmoved and unmoving. This alone might have cracked the foundation, but what truly isolated the US was the coordinated international response. America's allies, particularly in Europe, began mending fences with China, seeing Washington as the unstable actor. ASEAN and BRICS countries followed suit, framing the United States not as a defender of fair trade, but as a destabilizing force driven by unilateralism. The global narrative shifted quickly. Rather than admit error, Trump did what he always does. He reframed the narrative. In his version, the tariffs had achieved their goal. China blinked, negotiations had begun, and now America could afford to be magnanimous. It was a classic optics maneuver: pivot without apology, declare strategic victory, and shift tone while insisting control was never lost.